The Last of Us. If you've played it, you probably remember the giraffes, or that brutal opening, or Joel's, let's call it a controversial decision at the end. But here's what stuck with me after my third playthrough. This isn't really a game about zombies. Sorry, infected. It's a game about what happens when all the invisible agreements holding civilization together just stop working. Like, we don't think about it, but society is basically a massive shared hallucination. We all agree money has value, laws matter, murder is wrong, and you shouldn't eat your neighbors. And it works, until it doesn't. The Last of Us asks, what happens on day 1 of doesn't, and then day 100, and then 20 years later, when an entire generation has grown up never knowing what normal was supposed to feel like? Today we're diving into how this game, beneath all the zombie horror and stealth sections, is actually one of the smartest breakdowns of social collapse I've ever seen. How it shows morality, not as something that just is, but as something that requires maintenance, and what replaces it when the maintenance stops. Fair warning, this one gets dark, but also like, it's The Last of Us, you knew what you were signing up for. Let's go. Chapter 1. When the rules stop meaning anything. Okay, so the cordyceps outbreak hits. Civilization collapses in, what, a few weeks? Maybe months? But here's what the game gets right that a lot of zombie fiction doesn't. It's not the infected that destroy society, they're just the catalyst. What actually destroys society is that all the systems we depend on, hospitals, supply chains, police, courts, trust, they all break at the same time. And once they break, nobody knows what the rules are anymore. There's this sociology concept called anomie. French sociologist Emile Durkheim came up with it. Basically, it's what happens when social norms collapse and people are left in this state of normlessness. Not chaos exactly, but this disorienting void where the old rules don't work and new ones haven't formed yet. And that's exactly what we see in the Boston quarantine zone 20 years later. FEDRA, the military government, is trying to maintain order, but it's not real order, you know, it's just violence wearing an order costume. They have rules, curfews, ration cards, public executions for smuggling, but nobody believes in those rules. People follow them because they're scared, not because they think they're legitimate. The Fireflies are rebelling, but they're not really offering an alternative system. They're just fighting against the current one and hoping something better emerges from the rubble. And then you've got people like Joel and Tess, smugglers, operating in the gaps between the official system and complete lawlessness, making their own rules because the official ones are clearly bullshit. None of these groups trust each other. Hell, people within these groups barely trust each other. And that's the thing about anomie. It's not that people become monsters, it's that they lose the shared framework for deciding what monster even means. When there's no consensus on right and wrong, everyone's just improvising, making it up as they go. You see this in every settlement Joel and Ellie pass through. Pittsburgh's become a cannibal city ruled by hunters who literally prey on survivors. Bill's created this paranoid fortress where he trusts absolutely no one. Tommy's trying to build a functioning community in Jackson, but it only works because they've managed to reconstruct some version of social norms, and even then, it's fragile as hell. Every community is basically asking the same question: how do we decide what's okay now that all the old answers are gone? And they all come up with different answers, most of them involve violence. Chapter 2. The systems that were supposed to save us. Let's talk about what was supposed to prevent all this. Before the outbreak, society ran on what Max Weber called rationalization. Basically, we built these big, impersonal, efficient systems to handle everything. Hospitals for healthcare, courts for justice, markets for distribution, science for progress. The whole idea was that if we made everything rational enough, efficient enough, specialized enough, we'd be fine. We'd solve problems through expertise and organization, and then a fungal infection wipes out most of humanity in a few weeks. And whoops, turns out those systems were more fragile than anyone thought. The game shows you the corpse of rationalized society everywhere you go. Empty hospitals where people died waiting for care that never came. Abandoned military checkpoints where order meant shooting civilians who looked infected. Universities full of research that couldn't be completed because, well, everyone's dead or eating each other. The Fireflies are desperately trying to resurrect that old rational system. They've got scientists, a lab, a plan to develop a vaccine. They represent this belief that we can think our way out of catastrophe, that rational solutions still matter. And here's where it gets philosophically messy, because the Fireflies' plan requires killing Ellie to harvest her immunity, one life for a potential cure. Classic utilitarian calculus: sacrifice the few to save the many. In the old world, that might have been debatable. You'd have ethics committees, legal frameworks, debates about consent and bodily autonomy. The rational systems would have processed that decision through a million bureaucratic filters, but in the new world, Marlene just makes the call. One person deciding that Ellie's life is worth less than the possibility of a cure. And Joel looks at that rational decision and says, fuck that, because rationality requires distance, abstraction, the ability to see people as numbers in an equation, and Joel can't do that anymore. He's lived with Ellie. She's not a potential cure. She's a person who tells bad jokes and reads comics and trusts him. His decision at the end isn't rational. It's not even really moral in a systematic sense. It's relational. He's choosing based on love, attachment, obligation, all the messy, particular bonds that rationalized systems try to eliminate. The game is asking, when all the systems collapse, is that actually a loss? Or were those systems always missing something essential about what makes us human? Chapter 3. Love as the last moral framework. So if the old rules don't work and the rational systems are dead, what's left? People. Specific, individual people you actually care about. This is where The Last of Us gets really interesting philosophically, because it's basically arguing for what's called an ethics of care. The idea that morality isn't about abstract principles or universal rules, it's about relationships, vulnerability, and the particular obligations we have to specific people in our lives. Joel doesn't save Ellie because it's right in some universal sense. He saves her because he loves her. Because after Sarah died, he spent 20 years as an emotional corpse and Ellie brought him back to life. Because she matters to him, and that mattering is enough. The game never pretends this is heroic. It doesn't glorify Joel's choice. If anything, it shows you the cost. All those people who might have been saved by a vaccine, all the future suffering that continues because Joel chose his grief over their hope. But it also doesn't condemn him, because what's the alternative? Let them kill the one person who gave his life meaning again? Prioritize hypothetical future lives over the actual living, breathing kid standing in front of him. This is the ethics of care in its purest, most brutal form. It says, in a broken world, the only morality that survives is the one built on actual human connection. Everything else is just words. You see this pattern everywhere in the game. Tess dies to give Joel and Ellie a chance to escape. Not for some abstract cause, but because she's developed a relationship with them. Bill helps Joel not because it's the right thing to do, but because of his history with Joel and his complicated feelings about Frank. Sam and Henry stick together because they're brothers. Tommy built Jackson not on principles, but on community, actual face-to-face relationships. The only morality that matters is the one between people who know each other's names, and that's deeply uncomfortable, right? Because it means moral obligations are limited, localized. You have massive responsibilities to the people you love, and basically none to strangers. Which is kind of how the world worked before we invented universal human rights and social contracts. We cared about our tribe, our family, our village. Everyone else was just other. The Last of Us is suggesting that's what we revert to when civilization collapses. Not because humans are naturally selfish, but because morality is expensive. It requires resources, stability, trust. And when you don't have those things, you can only afford to care about the people right in front of you. Chapter 4. The Infected as a Mirror. Quick detour because we need to talk about what the infected actually represent in this game. On the surface, they're your standard zombie threat, but sociologically, they're something way more disturbing. They're what happens when personhood gets erased. A clicker used to be someone had a name, a life, people who loved them, and now they're just gone. The body's still there, but the person, the social being, the one who participated in relationships and norms and meaning making, they've been completely obliterated. And here's the horrifying part. The game shows how easily everyone else starts thinking of other humans the same way. The hunters in Pittsburgh don't see other survivors as people. They're resources, threats, prey. David's group in the winter chapter literally eats people, but they've convinced themselves it's okay because they're not eating people, they're eating outsiders. The moral category of human has shrunk to just their group. Even Joel does this. There's that scene where he's torturing those guys for information, and it's brutal. He's not seeing them as people with lives and families. He's seeing them as obstacles between him and Ellie. The cordyceps infection is a biological process, but dehumanization, that's social. That's a choice everyone in this world is constantly making, deciding who counts as a person and who doesn't. And the scarier it gets, the smaller that circle becomes. By the end, Joel's circle of moral concern is literally one person. Ellie, everyone else, the Fireflies, the doctors, Marlene, all the hypothetical future people a vaccine might save. They're outside the circle, they don't count. That's what collapse does. It doesn't turn you into a monster, it just keeps shrinking the definition of us until there's barely anyone left in it. Chapter 5. Societies built on fear versus societies built on hope. So we've talked about what collapsed. Let's talk about what people try to build in the ruins. Because The Last of Us shows you a bunch of different post-apocalyptic communities, and they're all fascinating experiments in social organization. You've got the Boston QZ under FEDRA, a militarized authoritarian state. Order through fear and punishment. It works in the sense that people aren't eating each other, but it's also clearly dying. There's no future there, just endless grinding survival. Then Pittsburgh, which went the opposite direction. Total collapse of authority, replaced by violent tribalism. The hunters operate on pure predatory logic. Find other survivors, kill them, take their stuff. It's Hobbes' war of all against all, played out in a city that's slowly cannibalizing itself. Bill's compound is this paranoid survivalism taken to its logical extreme. He's created perfect security by trusting absolutely no one, and he's alive, which counts for something, but he's also utterly alone. Frank left him, and Bill's response was to just seal himself off more. Then you get to Jackson, and it's different. Tommy's community has somehow managed to reconstruct actual social bonds. They've got rules based on mutual cooperation, not just fear. They have movie nights, patrols, shared meals. They're trying to remember what normal was. And the game is asking, which model survives? The fear-based one or the hope-based one? Because here's the thing, fear is really efficient in the short term. It keeps people in line, prevents chaos, justifies harsh measures. But it's exhausting. And it doesn't give people a reason to keep going beyond maybe I won't die today. Hope is harder. It requires trust, which is risky. It requires believing things can get better, even when there's no evidence for that. It requires caring about a future you might not live to see, but it's also the only thing that builds anything sustainable. FEDRA and the hunters, they're not creating anything. They're just consuming what's left of the old world. Jackson's actually trying to grow food, raise kids, teach them to read. They're planting seeds, literally and figuratively. The tragedy is that Joel sees this. He sees that Jackson works, that Tommy's found something real, and he still chooses to burn down the Firefly's hope for a cure because it threatens his hope. Ellie. Chapter 6. The lie and the truth. We need to talk about the endings. Joel lies to Ellie. Tells her the Fireflies found dozens of people like her, that a cure wasn't possible, that they let her go. None of that's true. He killed everyone to save her, doomed a potential vaccine, made a choice for her without her consent. And Ellie knows he's lying. That final okay is one of the most loaded words in gaming. Is she accepting the lie because she wants to believe it, because she's too tired to fight, because she understands why he did it and forgives him anyway, because she's realized that truth doesn't matter as much as the relationship? The game doesn't tell you. It just cuts to black on that ambiguity, and I think that's the point, because The Last of Us isn't arguing for objective truth or universal morality. It's arguing that in a collapsed world, there is no objective standpoint anymore. Joel's not a hero, but he's not a villain either. He's a man who made a choice based on the only thing that still felt real to him. His love for a surrogate daughter, Marlene's not a villain. She's a woman trying to save humanity, but she was willing to kill a child to do it. Both of them are operating from legitimate moral frameworks that just happen to be incompatible. And Ellie's caught in the middle, forced to decide what she believes even though she knows she's not getting the full picture. That's the post-collapse condition right there. No more authorities to tell you the truth, no more systems to make the hard choices for you, just individuals trying to figure out what matters, lying to each other and themselves to make it bearable. The game's final question isn't, did Joel do the right thing? It's, when there is no right thing, how do you live with what you chose? So, The Last of Us, a game about zombies, also a game about what holds societies together and what happens when those bonds dissolve. It shows you that civilization isn't buildings or technology or institutions, it's agreement. It's millions of people collectively deciding to follow the same rules, believe the same things matter, care about the same strangers, and when that agreement breaks, you don't get chaos. You get 1,000 different small societies, each with their own rules, their own circles of care, their own definitions of what's human and what's expendable. Some try to rebuild the old systems, some embrace the collapse, some just try to survive one more day, and the game refuses to tell you which one's right, because maybe there is no right answer when the world's broken badly enough. What it does say, and this is what haunts me, is that in the absence of everything else, love persists, small, particular, often selfish love that prioritizes the people right in front of you over the abstract masses you'll never meet. Is that beautiful or horrifying? Is Joel a monster for choosing Ellie, or is he the only honest person left? The game says, yes, both, neither. It depends on where you're standing. Anyway, go play The Last of Us if you somehow haven't. Make yourself devastated. Question all your assumptions about morality and social order. Let me know in the comments, did Joel do the right thing? Is there even a right thing in that situation? How small does your circle of care have to get before you're just a monster with good part? Thanks for watching. And hey, maybe be grateful that society's still mostly working today, that we still mostly agree on the rules, that you can walk outside without having to decide which strangers count as human, because The Last of Us reminds us that agreement's more fragile than we think. See you next time.